your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for our final weekend cast before Christmas. Well, it's been a doozy of a week in federal politics. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh now says his party will table a non-confidence motion to bring the Liberal government down. In a post on X, Singh says the New Democrats will bring forward the motion in the next sitting of the House of Commons. The House won't return until January 27th after they rose for Christmas break on a Tuesday. Singh's comments came about an hour before Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was set to shuffle his cabinet. And speaking of Trudeau, it's been a turbulent week for the Prime Minister and his Liberal Party. First, a political bombshell was dropped on Ottawa Monday when Chrystia Freeland announced she was leaving cabinet as Finance Minister. She made the surprise declaration ahead of a scheduled cabinet meeting where she was set to deliver the fall economic statement. There are reports that Trudeau wanted Freeland to leave finance and accept a different portfolio, which she declined. This was followed by pressure within his own caucus calling for him to resign. Then Canada's Housing Minister Sean Fraser of Nova Scotia announced he will not be seeking re-election, making him the 9th minister this year to announce they'll be stepping down from cabinet. Then on Friday, Trudeau made a shuffle to his cabinet. The PM's shuffle comes a month ahead of the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. That gives new ministers just a few short weeks to learn their new departments inside and out. According to the Canadian Press, Montreal MP Rachel Bandayan, Winnipeg MP Terry Dugard, Toronto MP Nate Esgreen-Smith, Ottawa MP David McGuinty, and Nova Scotia MP Darren Fisher will all be named to cabinet. Following Freeland's resignation last Monday, Canada's Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who's been a longtime friend of Trudeau, was sworn in as Canada's new Finance Minister.
I look forward to working with Canada's premiers as I have for the last number of years on some important challenges facing the country. I'm also thinking tonight of the remarkable women and men who work in the public safety portfolio, in the department and in the agencies. I've been inspired by their work over the last year and a half, and I look forward to hopefully continuing to support them in the work that they do for Canadians.
LeBlanc will also remain on as Canada's Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. And by the way, the fall economic statement revealed Canada's deficit inflated from $40 billion to almost $62 billion. That includes $1.3 billion over the next 6 years to beef up Canada's border security. Now, Canada's premiers met in Toronto this past week to discuss cross-border trade on the heels of a 25% tariff threat from U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who is hosting the First Minister's meeting, says it's time to push back on Trump. Sun political columnist Brian Lilley says many premiers are in agreement with Ford.
I think that the premiers are stepping up because the prime minister is not. I mean, you look across the country, you've got Francois Legault in Quebec saying he's sending their provincial police force down to the border. You've got Wab Kinew, the new Democrat premier in Manitoba, saying he's sending conservation officers down. Danielle Smith has one of the most detailed plans on dealing with the border with 51 sheriffs and a 2-kilometer no-go zone. And then Doug Ford, he obviously has a different take than Smith. Smith says she doesn't want to bring in anything that would stop oil and gas flowing south. But Ford says he will stop electricity. There's obviously very different considerations when it comes to the economy. But these premiers are stepping up where Trudeau is absent. And they're saying, all right, we'll work with you on the border, Mr. Trump. But in the case of Doug Ford, he's saying, we'll work with you on the border, but if you hit us, I'll hit you back hard.
The 55,000 picketing employees of Canada Post put down their picket signs and picked up their mail bags after the Canada Industrial Relations Board ordered them back to work last Tuesday under their existing contract, which has now been extended until May 15th. Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon said he would appoint an industrial inquiry commission to investigate the bargaining issues and come up with recommendations on how a new potential agreement can be reached. Meanwhile, analysts say Canada Post's nearly month-long strike may have finally driven some customers away for good, leaving the Crown Corporation in even worse shape than before. Workers returned to their jobs Tuesday following the parcel stoppage that forced thousands of businesses and individuals to use private carriers to deliver packages. While some businesses and organizations might come back to the Postal Service, others that had yet to make the switch to digital messaging could now opt for online-only invoicing and communication, removing even more revenue from the Canada Post. The Canadian Mint announced Canadian legend Terry Fox will be on the new $5 bill. The athlete and activist who ran the Marathon of Hope in the early 1980s helped to raise close to $25 million towards cancer care and research before he passed away. Port Coquitlam Mayor Brad West expressed his immense pride in their hometown hero being honored in this way. Terry Fox will replace Sir Wilfrid Laurier on the next version of the $5, and he will then be moved to the next version of the $50 bill. The federal government says it's pushing its target to achieve a net zero electricity grid back 15 years to the year 2050. Officials say it's part of the new clean electricity regulations announced this week. Ottawa previously said it wanted to decarbonize all electricity grids by 2035, but received a lot of pushback from both Alberta and Saskatchewan that it was not doable. Premier Danielle Smith has said that Alberta would mount a legal challenge, saying the regulations wade into provincial jurisdiction. She said that is a case Alberta fully expects to win. It turns out the GST tax holiday is becoming a real pain for several small businesses across Canada. The federal government is pausing the levy on a number of items, including prepared foods and toys, until mid-February. Beverly Rasmussen is a small business expert from Langley, BC, who has worked with more than 700 small business owners. She says this GST break is becoming a real fiasco for many.
No one asked small business owners whether this was a good idea or not. You know, I'll give you a direct quote from a client of mine. I can't wait to spend December 12, 13, and 14 manually reviewing every SKU I have to temporarily adjust the tax status, only to be able to do it again on Valentine's Day. What a nightmare. So here we're at the busiest time of year, Christmas, and you know, when their staff are maxed, and now then they're going to have to do it again in New Year. Plus, it covers over 2 tax years for most business owners. So if you consider the cost of accounting, dealing with a tax issue this year and next year, it's money, time, productivity. Yeah, it is definitely a nightmare, as the client says.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is holding Alberta government officials' feet to the fire since the province promised to reduce the income tax bracket from 10% to 8% in the new year. The UCP said this provincial income tax would save families around $1,500 each. Chris Sims, the Alberta director for the CTF, says that families need that kind of relief right now.
A lot of folks in Alberta are doing better compared to other places in Canada, but as you know, we still have record lineups for places like food banks and record demand from working families. That's a nice way of saying that a parent who's holding down a job is still counting on donated jars of peanut butter to feed their kids. So that's a serious concern here in Alberta. We've also got fuel costs. Winter is here. We've got home heating costs. A lot of folks are finding it really unaffordable. And so this is why we are urging the Alberta government to keep its promise in the new year and cut that income tax rate.
'Tis the season to be more giving, but according to some alarming stats, charitable giving is on the decline in Canada and has been for years. In fact, on average, our American neighbors are much more neighborly than Canadians when it comes to donating money to charities. To shed more light on this, I spoke with Grady Monroe, who is a policy analyst at Fraser Institute and the co-author of the study Generosity in Canada, the 2024 Generosity Index. Take a look. Grady, give us the latest stats. So are Canadians more or less generous than in previous years?
So what we found is that generosity in Canada has been declining for many years now. And how we measure that is we look at 2 metrics. We look at the share of Canadian tax filers who are donating to charity, and we look at the share of total income that is donated. And what we find is that in 2022, which is the latest year of data, both of those metrics hit 20-year lows. We saw that only 17.1% of Canadian tax filers donated to charity, and only 0.5% of total income was donated.
So what is the actual percentage of total income that was donated in 2022? Like, do you have numbers for how much average people are actually donating compared to Canada's all-time highest percentage of total income?
Yeah, so as mentioned, the share of total income in 2022 that was donated was 0.5%. And in the last 20 years, the highest level we've seen was in 2006, and that saw Canadians donating 0.72% of their total income. So we have seen a considerable drop since then.
Okay, do we know why?
It's a good question. We've seen this decline occurring for some time now, and while unfortunately in this study we don't look at the specific reasons or factors that are causing this decline, but we can highlight certain things that are likely coming into effect. We know that research says people's level of after-tax income, their religious affiliation, age of the population, level of education, all of those are factors that help determine the level of generosity in a jurisdiction. But we can't say specifically which of those factors is causing this decline.
Okay, so which province had the highest percentage of tax filers that donated to charity, and then on the flip side, which had the lowest?
Yeah, so in 2022, we saw that Manitoba, it had the highest percentage of tax filers donating to charity at 19.3%. And on the other end, we saw New Brunswick had the lowest share of tax filers donating at 14.7%.
So which province donated the highest percentage of its aggregate income to charity? And then on the flip side, which one donated the least?
Yeah, so similar to the other metric, we see Manitoba at the top end. In 2022, Manitobans donated 0.71% of their total income to charity, which was the highest of any province in Canada. And on the lower end, we saw that Quebec donated the least share of total income at just 0.26%.
And speaking of charitable giving, the Salvation Army is doing its last push before Christmas. They're in the final days of their Toys for Tots campaign. You might also be accustomed to hearing the sounds of their ringing bells to draw attention to their kettle campaign. I spoke with Lieutenant Zachary Marshall of the Lethbridge Salvation Army to find out how many families are in need this season.
The demand for our services, especially at Christmas time, is on the rise. And I think that's true of all of the helping agencies in Lethbridge. It is an unfortunate side effect of the inflation and how things are going. And we're really just seeing families who are struggling. We're seeing families who have never had to reach out for help before. Reach out for help this Christmas time. And, people are faced with the impossible choice. Do I pay for rent or do I pay for Christmas? And we're really kind of seeing all sides of it. And it's heartbreaking. It's devastating. We're happy to help, but it is unfortunate that there is such a demand for our help.
Yeah. And of course, we were talking about how this is a crazy time of year. So every year, the Salvation Army does the annual Toys for Tots outreach at Christmas time. So tell us what that's all about and how we can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. We are big believers in the magic of Christmas. And I personally hold true to the fact that I think every child deserves to open a gift on Christmas morning. And that's kind of where our Toys for Tots campaign comes in. We're one of a few agencies in Lethbridge that provide toy assistance. And our Toys for Tots campaign this year, we will see 500 children and parents come through the doors to shop for their kids, and hopefully we can provide some toys. So we do have some drop-off locations throughout Lethbridge at locations like Toys R Us, Center Village Mall, and the Toy Mountain Drive that they're doing there, and other places in Lethbridge. So we're really ramping up because the time is coming near in the next couple of weeks where we're going to be busy being elves in Santa's workshop is how we kind of refer to it. And it just is really special for us to be a part of that.
Right, and this is where parents can go and actually shop for their kids. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do people apply for that?
Yeah, so we have an online application on our website. So lethbridgesalvationarmy.ca/register. That's the link to our application, and we still do have room. So now's the time to apply if you're thinking about it.
And then, of course, speaking of this time of year, I believe that your annual Kettle Campaign fundraiser is underway now. So what's the fundraising goal and where do the funds get distributed?
Yeah, so this year we have a big goal of $220,000, and that money goes directly to support the work that we do in our community at Christmas time with our Toys for Tots campaign and our food assistance, but really throughout the year with some of the programs that we're able to offer. So the need is increasing, and we're really banking on the generosity of the people of Lethbridge to help us meet that $220,000 goal.
Mm-hmm. Has the TAP payment really helped increase donations for the Kettle Campaign?
It certainly has. I mean, nobody, or not a whole lot of people carry cash anymore. I can't say nobody, but the TAP donations account for about 15% of all of the donations come in. So that, so it is a help, absolutely. It just gives one other option for people who are passing by our kettle to stop and make a donation.
Yeah, and you were saying donations are down 50%, and that's shocking to me. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's the economy, or is it the postal strike, like we were saying?
I think it's a variety of reasons. I don't think the postal strike has necessarily helped the case, but when we're thinking of inflation, the demand for our services are certainly on the rise. But the flip side of that is things are so much more expensive for everybody. I think we're all feeling a pinch this year. And so not everyone is able to help in the ways that they have before.
Well, every holiday season, there are a lot of parties going on, and chances are alcohol may be involved, which can lead to poor decisions like driving while impaired. We hear stories of that far too often, but what we don't hear often enough is how driving while intoxicated can ruin the lives of so many people. Elizabeth Esfeld, the chapter secretary for the Lethbridge and Area Chapter for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, shares a personal experience when her life was impacted by a drunk driver. Here she is now with BCN's Naveen Day.
A few years ago, I tried to stop an impaired driver from getting behind the wheel. She put the car in reverse and knocked me down, causing some serious injuries.
Wow.
Yeah, and I thankfully have recovered from some of the injuries, not all. But the trauma of that day will live on in my mind for the rest of my life.
Let's talk more about that trauma, like because this is something that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. Let's hear more about that.
Going through this court system and the court process is extremely overwhelming, confusing, and scary. And without Mad Lethbridge and Area, it would have been 10 times worse. And the support is ongoing, even though my court cases are all done. And I have met such wonderful people, and that they have different stories other than mine, but we all share a strong bond.
Do you have any stats that you can share with us? Like how many people are killed or injured in Canada annually from impaired drivers?
Every year, hundreds are killed and thousands are injured every year. An alarming stat, every hour in Canada, an average of 9 federal criminal charges and provincial short-term license suspensions are laid for alcohol or drug impaired driving.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Absolutely. And surveys also reveal that young males continue to have higher than average rates of driving after consuming alcohol, cannabis, or other drugs. What is it about the male lifestyle that causes this, and what needs to happen to change this?
Again, this comes back to education. By continuing to share our stories, not only in schools, but to the public, we hopefully will save a life. And today we have so many options for a safe ride home, from taxis, designated drivers, Ubers, or stay where you are if possible. Before heading out, make a plan. Set a few dollars aside for a taxi. Organize a time your designated driver to pick you up. Call a family member. No matter what, never make the wrong choice and get behind the wheel.
Do Canadians still have some misperceptions about the seriousness of driving after consuming alcohol or marijuana?
Definitely. Some people don't actually ever think it will happen to them. Being pulled over by the police and charged with impaired driving is happening. But it would be so much worse if you choose to drive while impaired and cause a crash that may kill you or someone else.
And there's also technology now where devices are readily available to self-test your own blood alcohol level. I've seen them in Costco, I've seen them online on Amazon and even Temu. Any thoughts on whether this is advisable and helpful or not?
If you need to rely on a device to self-test your ability to drive, should you maybe think again and call a cab? You are putting your life and others at risk. You may not have had too much to consume. Do not depend on a device. Depend on yourself to make a better decision, and do not drive.
We need to take a short break, but when we return, we discover how much money is needed to put together a Christmas hamper for one family. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The year is almost over. Many are preparing for the Christmas holidays and others are getting ready to welcome in the new year. The Interfaith Food Bank is preparing to meet the needs of low-income families for next year. And the group's executive director, Danielle McIntyre, discusses how many donors have not been able to give as much support as they usually do. And she asks for the community to continue to support them in the vital work they're doing in our community.
We're so grateful for the community support. We know that a lot of our Christmas campaign funds have not been received because of a delay with the post. We want to encourage people that it is never too late to give. We will need your support in the new year because we haven't been able to receive it yet. We will ensure that we meet the need for every family that comes forward and needs help for Christmas. But we are a little bit worried about 2025 because we are only at about 65% of our projected campaign. We have a ballpark estimate every year of how many Christmas hampers we're going to give out, which is usually a little higher than what we are regularly giving out month to month. This year we plan for about 1,000 to 1,200 households, and so far we have given out 874. We still have 3 days left to go, so we are thinking we're going to be very close to those targets. At this time of year is when we recruit the bulk of our support. Unfortunately for us, a lot of people think about food banks from Thanksgiving until Christmas during that season of giving. We base our annual budget on what comes in at this time of year. And so this coming January 2025, we will be figuring out what we can spend based off of what's been received this year. What we're seeing is that unfortunately a lot of the food resources that are coming in are going out just as fast as we receive them.
McIntyre says with a donation of $300, the Interfaith Food Bank can provide a Christmas hamper to a large family. As of Friday, Interfaith has distributed over 900 Christmas hampers and hopes to hit their estimate of at least 1,000 households this year. They're currently at 83% of their campaign goal and encourage those who wish for a charitable tax receipt to have their donations postmarked or stamped by December 31st. The final tally for their Christmas Hope campaign will be given in the new year. It is the busiest time of the year for many charities, and another group that's busy collecting and distributing donations right now is the Southern Alberta Bikers. Toys and money collected through their toy run this fall have gone to Lakeview and Senator Buchanan schools, the Angel Tree and My City Care campaigns, plus Child Life Services at Chinook Regional Hospital, both food banks, as well as the Student Food Bank at both post-secondary institutions here in Lethbridge, Pregnancy Care Center, the Colehurst Legion, and several other charities, and they're not done yet, according to Dallas Hardy, president of Southern Alberta Bikers.
Well, we've still got some money coming in this year, and I believe by Christmas time we'll be probably between $6,000 and $7,000 that between what the checks that we presented last weekend and some donations we'll be making between now and Christmas. If anybody wants to make a donation, and that's the thing that everybody needs to know is our club, 100% of what we get goes back into the community. The club keeps nothing. We like giving back to the community. We like putting smiles on people's faces. It's kind of a feel-good thing.
Hardy says the Southern Alberta Bikers donate throughout the year, not just at Christmas time. Well, the Salvation Army in Lethbridge showcased an Advent art gallery at their workshop center this past week. The artwork, which featured prints from American artist Scott Erickson, are inspired from his artistic interpretation of the Christmas story. An official with the Salvation Army says the artist creatively visualizes the story of Jesus coming to earth as an infant.
His book is actually called Honest Advent. So I think when you look at the paintings, when you read the reflections, it just gives a really raw description of what Christmas meant 2,000 years ago and what it means for us today. The fact that God, in his infinite wisdom and infinite power, would come to earth as a helpless baby. It's something that I think we've lost the awe, we've lost the wonder of it. So that's what we're trying to, I guess, reinstill, is just the awe and wonder of that first Christmas.
Unfortunately, that art piece was on display only until December the 20th. If you missed it, you could possibly see it next year. We'll have to wait and see. Well, many cities across Canada are having issues with homelessness. Sadly, many who are battling addiction are living on the streets. There is a Christian nonprofit group in Lethbridge that is doing its part to not only help feed, clothe, and house those most vulnerable, but also share the good news of God's saving grace. Catch our interview with Ken Kissick from Streets Alive Mission coming up next. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.